Some very bad news has just landed, and I feel I must break off from my increasingly desperate attempts to get the next film appraisal video finished to comment on this bombshell while it is still news. The UK Space Agency is to lose its remaining independence and will be completely absorbed by the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, continuing the long history of the most massively mismanaged space policy on this planet. This is not a nation shooting itself in the foot. It's a continuation of the process of removing the foot very slowly with a blunt and rusty penknife to maximise the pain and the collateral damage. Greetings and felicitations. I'm Mark Hempsell and I'm a spacecraft system engineer with a career that has spanned the British government's pathetic and inept space policy pretty much since the founding of the European Space Agency in 1975. ESA was formed to recover the situation that was created by the United Kingdom's withdrawal from the European Launcher Development Organisation. Based on lessons learnt from the two European space organisations that preceded it, the assumption on the way ESA would work was that it would be an international organisation where national space agencies could negotiate and then manage joint projects. But, mostly at UK insistence, these projects would be voluntary, and member nations could opt out and would not have to join in anything they didn't like. And then, guess what? The UK chose not to join in most of the projects. After decades, this has eroded the world's third most effective space capability to almost nothing. The exception was space science projects, which are compulsory to all ESA members, so even the UK has to take part on a gross national product basis. Why this exception? Well, UK astronomers saw the writing on the wall and made sure they were protected. Everyone else involved in spaceflight were neither as politically adept nor as powerful. The point here is ESA quickly became an organisation that assumed all its members had a national space agency. It didn't, for example, generate project ideas of its own. It became the forum where national agencies can propose projects and then negotiate participation. It means every national space agency needed both its own national proposal mechanism and its own centre of engineering expertise. The UK missed all that subtlety and just assumed ESA would be just a full space agency. It would be the UK Space Agency. And therefore, following this flawed logic, Britain didn't need a national space agency because that would duplicate what it assumed ESA would do. So we had nothing at a national level to manage the UK space policy, whatever that was supposed to be, and that was never clear. Now, some canny and noble people could navigate in this anarchy and get some things through. Most spectacularly, the space platform that would be part of the Columbus program, which was Europe's buy into the American space station. As the American space station evolved on the American side and the UK science requirements became more focused, the Columbus space platform evolved into MDSAT. However, this anarchy and lack of coordination was clearly unsatisfactory. And by the mid-80s, the government decided to establish a coordinating body they called the British National Space Centre, which was not a space agency, but a body to get the anarchy with its sneak spending under control. And it did this with ruthless efficiency and relish. Hence, it rapidly acquired the nickname the Britain Not in Space Centre. To be clear, it had no budget. It just tracked spending in government departments so that the government could guess a number when it was asked what was its space budget. Of course, this is a bit of a con, as the real space budget, that is, money dedicated to space objectives, was effectively zero. It was just a tally of money spent by the government when using space to meet other objectives. The BNSC was also expected to advise the 10 government departments who did spend money on space, but it was limited in the advice it could give as it had absolutely no in-house space engineering expertise, and indeed very little in any other aspects of the space industry. But it was good at stopping things. So if you had launcher ideas or were arguing for UK involvement in human spaceflight, neither of which had a home in an existing government department, it was dead before it could be started, regardless of any merit. The BNSC's first director was Roy Gibson, who is a giant figure in the space industry. He had been the first director of ESA when it was founded, and was someone everyone in the UK space industry trusted and admired. He once sent me a personal letter as he was concerned about the direction I was moving my career to. And he was right to warn of the dangers, but I went there anyway as, for me, it was a matter of principle. But I was prodigiously flattered and proud that he thought enough of me to give me this advice. Anyway, as soon as the real stop everything strategy of the Thatcher government became clear, he felt he had to resign. And the BNSC director's job then became the preserve of civil service apparatchiks who seemed to have had some cock-up in their past career, and being made Director General of the BNSC was their punishment. These were dark times under the rule of Mordor, because the BNSC was not content with destroying the vestiges of the UK industry that had any presumption to do anything meaningful. They also insulted other nations, and in particular other ESA nations who did have such ambitions, making it difficult for those who tried to continue working in the field and making Britain a space industry pariah. Around 2000 there were a couple of parliamentary investigations, and a little later the space industry body did a highly influential report highlighting the value of the space industry to the UK economy. Now this was almost all from companies that used space systems, called the downstream industry, as Britain had squandered its massive 1970 lead in the upstream industry. But it still amounted to billions each year, and it was growing fast, and its growth ploughed through the 2008 recession. You may wonder how this could be happening if the evil orcs in the BNSC were stifling everything. Well, as the growth was in the downstream industry, most of the businesses included had no idea that they were being counted as part of the space industry. They had never even heard of the BNSC, so it could not exert its melodious influence. But the key point here is that at last someone had said the magic word. So the government got uncharacteristically sensible and decided to have a massive consultation of this industry, which in the jargon of the time they called the Space Growth and Innovation Team, and this had about 80 people from industry involved, including yours truly. Now, I'm normally sceptical of this sort of government consultation exercise, but I was impressed with this one. We managed to get all the Skylon technology requirements into the final overall technology roadmap, which meant that they would be able to receive Research Council funding. I even managed to sneak in some doors for the solar power satellites to open when the time came. The final report was clear on 2 points. Firstly, that massive growth could be expected in the global space sector, and with the right national policies we could get more than our fair share. And secondly, the BNSC was a failed concept and somewhat less effective than the proverbial chocolate teapot. And could we have a proper space agency, please, like the grown-up nations? Then a miracle occurred. The newly installed coalition government accepted these conclusions. A space policy objective was set to grow the size of the UK space industry with ambitious targets. This was by far and away the best and most imaginative space policy objective of any nation at the time, and it would have remained so had it not been unnecessarily watered down since. And we got a proper space agency with its own budget to pursue pure space objectives. And this agency was a spectacular success right out of the gate. We got support for launchers. We got an astronaut. We got many new startups and international investments which were encouraged by specialist space innovation centres. The Space Agency enabled national grant programs. It developed its own Centre for Engineering Expertise. It made positive efforts to promote British space internationally, and as a result, we got the rapid growth promised. Just 3 years after it was established, a Canadian friend said, completely unprompted, "You know, Mark, I think the UK is the best place to do space now." Just 5 years earlier, everyone would have agreed the UK was the worst place in the world to try and do space engineering. An incredible result I could barely have believed possible. I think the key to this success was that the first two chief executives did not come from the civil service, but from the space industry itself. They were both widely respected and had the contacts and the knowledge needed to make the new agency work as it should for an ESA member country. But for the civil service, this must have been a dangerous precedent. A staggeringly successful government agency run by outsiders. I keep thinking of the opening premise of Hot Fuzz at this point. Obviously, we cannot have this level of competence showing how mediocre career civil servants are. So there follows a succession of career civil servants as the agency's chief executives, who, while not quite the rejected muppets that had headed up the BNSC, were clearly not up to the job. So while there have been some positives in recent years, overall the trend has been downwards. Mistakes and incompetence have started to creep in, and the respect and admiration so rapidly and deservedly earned in the first 6 years have been squandered away. And more important, the spectacular UK space industry growth has stopped. A major red flag that things were unravelling was when, as a result of Brexit, the UK lost access to the military functions of the European Galileo global positioning system. To resolve this, the government bought into a bankrupt commercial communication satellite system with the argument that it could replace Galileo. This was such obvious nonsense as to bring everyone involved into ridicule. And within the space industry, it eroded respect and trust in the agency's grasp on reality. So now the failing UK Space Agency is to be absorbed into the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. I presume that there will be some kind of head, but they will be an even lower ranking career civil servant working to get that plum Foreign Office job as their next appointment, with none of the knowledge or contacts to manage Britain's interests in the massively complex global space industry. The best we can realistically hope for is that they might have seen a Star Trek film. I think the lesson is clear. If the government wants the magic possibilities for growth and innovation that's inherent in Britain, then like every other nation on the planet, it needs an independently funded space agency which has leadership that is experienced and understands the industry in its care. Sucking the government space policy management further into the clutches of the non-expert civil service will be the death of all that the 2010 Space Growth and Innovation team had the vision to outline.